Dr. Professor Julian Voss. Floor is yours.
Yes, thanks a lot for having me here, for inviting me to this speech to beautiful Estonia. I'm honored speaking to you. So I would like to talk more about the topic which has all been talked about in the speech before. So when we're talking about branding for cooperative, it's all about getting better financial results for farmers. And I would like to explain you a bit more what is behind this. So before I start my presentation, just give a brief introduction about myself. So I study business administration. I'm with my family related to agribusiness. So since I'm able to sing, I was raised with cows, with agriculture. So after my studies for business administration, I wrote a PhD thesis at the university in Göttingen. I focused very much on marketing strategies for food specialties and especially customer relationship management for agribusiness companies. Afterwards, I started, after finishing my PhD, I started like an independent consultancy working for global clients in the food and agribusiness value chain. Today, I'm, besides being a professor at the university, very much focused on doing business development for agribusiness companies in China. So I'm traveling quite frequently to China, and at the same time, I'm supporting food startups on their funding for new innovative business models. So today I would like to talk more about challenges for cooperatives. So we heard now from the Association for Cooperatives a lot of exciting news about cooperatives. So I have to pour some cold water on this, saying for sure cooperatives have a very strong market position, but for sure there are some challenges. I would like to explain why I believe that branding is very important for cooperatives. Just to show, challenges, opportunities for branding for cooperatives, and then explaining especially how cooperatives also, with a limited budget, are able to create valuable global brands, how food brands or like agribusiness brands can create it in the new world of communication, and then I would like to follow up with a short conclusion. So let us start with what is happening, or what is like the market condition of cooperatives. So we all know that cooperatives, and we heard this before, cooperatives have a very crucial role in the agribusiness value chains, not only in Europe, but also like globally. But, for sure, future survival of cooperatives is by no means guaranteed. And so why is it? So cooperatives have very often very complex business organizations. Cooperatives often or most likely have ambitious objectives between the members, and probably the business development. And for sure, there are a lot of topics we have to talk about which show that cooperatives may have a more weaker market position than we expect when we only try to review their overall market presence. So we all know that and we talked a bit about this before, that there's a quite big process on market consolidation in the value chains of food and agribusiness sector, which means that also cooperatives, have to be able to make investments to scale scale and scope their internal economies for greater efficiency and also like for competitiveness. And this is very important to say, okay, it's not about the amount of cooperatives we have in the food and agribusiness value chains. It's more than having very competitive cooperatives in the food and agribusiness value chains. And sometimes my feeling is that we have too small cooperatives in the food and agribusiness sector. And then it's all about being market-orientated, understanding changing customer behavior, understanding what our customer needs, and not only like focusing on what we can do in agribusiness. You know, we have a huge climate debate. We have huge challenges when we talk about milk production, when we talk about, how many meats we are able to eat in the future. And this is also like one way cooperatives have to focus on, being very market-orientated, understanding customer needs, and also developing brands which are very much consumer-focused. And this is one very crucial topic. And I would like to emphasize on a topic which I will follow on later on. What is very important for me to understand that in the future, cooperatives will not only compete with the global brands, with the worldwide giant food companies we all know, like Danone, Mars, Unilever, or Nestle, Coca-Cola, or Pepsi. There will be a lot of emerging companies diving into the markets. They're getting a lot of venture capital funding, small brands. And those small brands, they use everything, and they use like the same positioning as we heard before cooperatives would do. They talk about being small, being near to the nature, being near to produce. But the difference is that they have a huge amount of money to position their brands. And this is a quite difference to when we talk about cooperatives. And what is also very important to understand, that those companies, their business model is not to earn profit. Their business model is to gain a lot of brand awareness, to have a high customer reach, and to focus on market growth. And this is in conflict to the overall goals of cooperatives, which are very much member-focused. So cooperatives have to move from a very member-centric to a more market, customer-centric approach. This is one of the takeaway messages I would like to give you today. Not only like focusing on your members or on members on cooperative. You know, if members are satisfied, probably the cooperatives cannot anymore satisfy customer or market needs. Yeah, and we know all this. When we're talking later on about branding, there are a lot of topics in branding and companies which are in conflicts with the traditional principles of cooperatives, which means that, cooperatives have to be beneficial for their members. They have a member-financed principle, and the member control principle. And those arguments are standing against developing good, successful brands. So the key questions I would like to raise today is, does the variability of traditional cooperatives arrangements support a market-oriented strategy? And when we have a look into research, we can say, yes, market cooperatives are able to develop brands, and they are able to develop innovative market customer-oriented strategies. But at the same time, probably over the time, they probably have problems in supporting such strategies, because those strategies on a short term have impact on the financial results. So we already talked about a bit why is branding important. So we talked about trust, we talked about gaining customer awareness. But today, like, brands are the most important asset in modern markets. And brands are intangible assets, and brands deliver companies strong returns. They deliver awareness among customers. They deliver awareness for trade buyers as retailers. And it's also, brands are an asset, are a very important asset, which is very hard and very difficult to imitate. So if you have a very strong brand, this is very hard to imitate by competitors. So This is why brands are and represent the opposite of commodities. Because commodities, there's no differentiation between the product, and in marketplaces it's only about supply and demand. And this is really, really important to understand, saying that, branded products, they deliver the opposite to commodities. We talked a bit about this, and I don't want to tell you things you've heard about before, but just saying again that, brands, they are more than just names and symbols. Brands and brand awareness, brand positioning is all how companies relate with their customers. It's all about customer perceptions, it's all about customer feelings, and it's all about what a product means to a consumer or what consumers think about the product. So probably you've heard of this quote before: products are created in the factory, but brands are created in the mind. And everybody of you is influenced by strong brands. When you go shopping, when you buy your smartphone, when you decide for a special drink, we are all influenced by brands. Because, brands deliver value. Brands deliver emotional connection. Brands deliver awareness. So this is one of the most important things about brands. And just showing this to you, what this means to a agriculture commodity, I always show my students, the difference of a milk price. So in Germany, we have Bärenmarke, which is a very strong German milk brand, and they sell the same product when you minus the VAT tax. So they are able to sell their product, 1 liter milk, 50% on a 50% higher price net margin than the price entry brand of Rewe retailer in Germany. And it's all about the brand. I think, my children, they always tell me Bärenmarke tastes better than the normal milk. But it only tastes better because they see this nice small bear. And it's nothing more than this. But this is, it brings more value. So for sure you will raise now the question, if we have to invest into brands and we have to invest into market spendings, what is the financial impact for cooperatives? And going back to research, going back to literature, you can see that there's the impact of brand equity on the financial performance of marketing cooperatives. So this is like proved in research. And I just give you this one quote. It's a recent study from 2019. The empirical analysis indicates a positive relationship of brand equity to financial performance of marketing cooperatives. So if you're able to create and willing to create successful, strong brand in marketing agribusiness cooperative, you will for sure, in the long term, will have better financial results than cooperatives who are not focusing on brands. And also, like talking about normal companies, all the very successful companies in the world, the most valuable companies in the world, they all have very strong brands. We know that, there are a lot of, and we saw some other brands before, so there are a lot of successful corporate brands across the world. And, I don't want you to understand me wrong, that, cooperative never achieved to develop strong, important brands. But there are only a few cooperatives who did this in the past and who really have very strong, very valuable brands. If you review market research data all across Europe, where consumers are asked which are the most important brands for them in the food and beverage space, there are only a few brands from cooperatives are mentioned. And this is for me a clear indication that cooperatives have to work more and more on building strong, powerful brands. So, what are like the challenges and opportunities for cooperatives? Just to summarize this again, so we talked about, within cooperatives, we talked about that they have complex business organizations with ambitious objectives between the members. We talked a bit about knowledge, and often cooperatives, they don't have enough marketing and branding knowledge internally. Cooperatives, they really have to move from this member-centric to a more market consumer-centric approach, and they have to find solution for the capital constraint when they would like to develop strong brands. Talking about the market opportunities. So I talked about that branded products allow higher profitability for companies. Second is that we are facing, and I will come back on this later on, we are facing changing consumer behaviors, and what is very important to understand, that consumers, they more and more like, and they more and more focus smaller, more specialized brands, which are aligned to their more and more specialized consumer behavior. So I'm talking about the David versus Goliath principle, so where you can say like smaller brands are well recognized against the brands from the big market giants like Danone, Unilever, or Coca-Cola. And what is also very important to understand so when we're talking about the European Union, and we're talking about those 300 million people living in the European Union. So for me, the markets for companies in the food and agribusiness value chain in the European Union, it's not Europe, it's the world. When we're talking about 1.5 billion Chinese who are changing their eating habits, who are looking for, those Chinese people, Chinese consumers, looking for strong foreign brands. Those are the opportunities, and those opportunities will in future also emerge like in Africa or like all other Asian markets. So it's all about getting customer reach in emerging markets. It's not about talking about the European Union, about the market. It's about export orientation. And export orientation in cooperatives, from my perspective, will only work if those cooperatives have strong, valuable brands for consumers all across the world. So let me have like a primarily conclusion saying that agribusiness cooperatives have to focus on brand building for their products and services, even with small budgets, using the most efficient, effective marketing approaches. And this is why I would like to talk in the second part of my speech more about low budget branding and low budget marketing. So when we're talking about this, it refers that cooperatives have capital constraints. And when small cooperatives, when you as a leader of a small cooperative, you're focusing on develop stronger brands, you have to handle the situation that your marketing budget is probably in the beginning very limited. And that's all about low budget marketing or low budget branding, which is explained in marketing literature as an unconventional marketing tactics, which is used to surprise, to humor consumers using established marketing campaigns, but using it at minimal costs. And one of the reasons why low budget branding or low budget marketing works so well and has such a high impact in these days, it's all about social media. It's all about the ability of companies to reach their customers directly throughout social media, building direct relations with their target customers, and focusing, delivering content, explaining the product, and doing a very customer-focused marketing strategy besides having big budgets for TV campaigns or media campaigns, just focusing on those social media. And then it's all about viral branding. What means viral branding? It's that the content you would like to deliver to your target customers, to your target consumers, is spread as a virus among these. So it's about visibility, it's about awareness, and there are a lot of great examples how small food startup, focused on viral branding. They delivered very creative content, and they have the opportunity to develop brands. I met a very successful venture capital fund some weeks ago, which invests a lot into food companies in North America. And then they told me, and this is a very good example on viral branding, they told me that they are producing a special drink. It's a cherry drink, which is very healthy for people doing professional sports. And they recognize that Serena Williams, the famous tennis player, is drinking also this cherry juice. And then they invited her to be part of the company. So they granted her some shares, and at the same point, they asked her to do some viral campaigns with this on Instagram. And then they had like a customer reach of 2 to 3 million within days. And this is like viral branding. It's just about some shares, but getting with those shares in the company a very broad access to the customers you would like to reach. So, it's about influential people, reaching the most influential people and working together with them and allowing customer reach without big budgets. So, and what's happening also, like in this example I was talking about Serena Williams, is that you convince those people to make the brand their own, to get this market reach. And this is a very effective way in doing this. And to be honest, I never recognized small agribusiness cooperatives to really follow this way. I'm not talking about those agribusiness cooperatives who are already having big brands, who have marketing budgets, who can work together with celebrities. I'm talking about small cooperatives who are delivering something which is available for customers. So when we're talking about viral and low budget marketing branding, so those strategies, for sure, they are very difficult to plan. They are very difficult to execute. It's probably, for sure, it's easier having big budgets, spreading big budgets into markets. But when we're talking about viral branding, when we're talking about low budget marketing, it's all about being very genius, being very creative, being very special in developing those campaigns. And for sure, there's a lag between the knowledge and the competencies within cooperatives and what is needed for creating successful viral and low budget marketing campaigns. So probably one of my advice to Copa-Cogeca would be, having more trainings in this area. Being like more on the marketing side, more on the branding side, and supporting cooperatives with this. When we're talking about success factors in low budget marketing campaigns, so what is very important that you have a clear understanding, and I will also come back on this later on, that you have a very clear understanding on your target needs, on your target customers, and on their needs. So, what are they looking for? What do they like? You need to have good and innovative ideas. You have to have messages with emotional, touching content. You need high quality content which could be shared on social media. And it's also important having a cross-media distribution among digital media. There is one approach from a US consultant, which is called Tom Forrest, and he's supporting a lot of small startup brands and develop branding strategies with very small budget. And he developed the 9 pillars of big food brand success, and I would like to explain a bit on this very, very nice approach and very structured approach for small companies to develop powerful brands when you're in the area of food business. So Tim Forrest outlines like that you have to focus on consumers, products, and retailers, and it's all about having like a core statement. It's having bridging this core statement to the vision to bring successful products into the market. So what does this mean? First of all, it's all about consumer level. So I talked before about that cooperatives have to be more market and consumer centric than being very much member centric. So being customer centric means how your company and product resonates with the ideal consumer. So which consumer you would like to focus on. And how does your product fits to the daily life of consumers? Is it a special product for breakfast? Is it a special product for having a more healthy nutrition? That is all about. Customer connected. So how do customers respond to your product today? So do you already have interactions with customers throughout social media? So show this to potential retailers, show this in your sales pitch. And then it's all about consumer insights. So again, understanding consumer, understanding what they want, understanding consumer needs. When we're talking about changing consumer trends, and I just brought some big consumer trends with me, which I found in the internet. So there are a lot of consumer trends on which cooperatives can react. So first of all, when we're talking about total well-being. So what is behind? So consumers are treating their bodies like an ecosystem and seeking solutions that are complement their personal health and evolving needs. All those natural products farmers can produce and bringing those to consumers, this matches to total well-being. And a second thing I would like to emphasize is on displays. Consumers and brands are becoming more aware that they have a digital persona to nurture and grow. So it's all about saying, okay, being digital with a brand, being also like digital with a food brand. And following up on this, so when we're talking about like future consumer trends, on what will consumers react in the future? So just talking about the growing segments, so value creation throughout premiumization. Sometimes it's all about just having a higher price. Chinese customers, they buy foreign brands when they're very expensive, because they think expensive brands have a high quality. German white wine, which is probably sold for 7 or 8 euros in German retailers, is sold for 50, 60 euros in China per bottle. And we're not talking about tariffs, we're not talking about logistic costs, because this is only a little price on it. But it's all about, value creation throughout premiumization. And this also works in Western markets, also works here. Gender segmentation. Products only for men, only for women, only for elder people. It's a very growing market, making brands more focused on on genders, and also like on ages. We talked a bit about growth in emerging markets, so think about how your brand could interact with African consumers, could interact with Chinese consumers, with Asian consumers. And the last very important topic, and I would add to this also like talking about climate change, so products being very natural, being very organic, having a very good carbon footprint. Innovations is all value added, so products bring something which is better for you, better health, sleeping better, all the stuff you're talking about. And then it's all about, consumer trends, saying, okay, like how to digital interact with consumers. Probably also like having a new way how to distribute your products. Talking about e-food commerce, talking about, not working together with retail in the first step, but focusing more on a digital way to interact with the consumers. Coming from the consumer level, going now to the product level, so we're talking about product innovations. We're talking about unmet customer needs, consumer needs, and I will talk about this later on. It's all about creative execution. So like good packaging, understanding how packaging interact with consumer needs, and then, talking about the strong brand and your idea how to develop a strong brand in the market. And when I'm talking about unmet consumer needs, in these days I like to talk about Beyond Meat. So you probably heard about this plant-based burger patties, so vegetarian way to eat a burger. So this is vegetarian. It's not meat, it's vegetarian. It tastes like meat. It has, has the same flavor as meat. And it was an unmet consumer need. Having a diet which is not focused on meat, it's having a diet focused on plant-based proteins. And this company was founded like 6 years ago, and they IPO'd on New York Stock Exchange 6 months ago. And they now have a market valuation of $8 billion. And my question is, why do not cooperatives are able to develop such product concepts, such brands into markets? Because this is really delivering value to their members. And there are a lot of fast-growing food and beverage brands. And I just brought some with me, which, none of those are owned by cooperatives. Those are all food startups, I talked about this before, receiving about a lot of venture capital money, developing fast-growing, consumer-focused, very strong brands. So cheese without milk, so plant-based cheese. The biggest development in North America on Western Europe market. Or when we're talking about, this is like the best example for me, taking a probably old-fashioned product, so kraut, garbage, which is, when you sell it, when you buy it in Germany, so it's like it's very it's packed not on a very consumer-friendly way. They only invented like a new packaging. Or like having also like this. This is a very good example. It's butter, but the butter is better for you. Because they put additional values into it, making it more healthier, with more vitamins in it. And it's one of the emerging brands in the US market at these moments. So I just would like to give you like simple ideas how products could be better for you and reach a more focused target group. So going further on to the retailer level, so when you go to a retailer and you have to convince the retailer that they have to list your small emerging food brand. You have to explain like what would be the financial impact to the category. You know, how could this new product or new brand support overall financial results of the food retailer, and also like give directions when the products would be consumed by consumers, when consumers like to buy the product. The last thing I would like to talk about today is to understand how communication models changed in recent years when we're talking about social media. So like years ago, like the traditional media model was, okay, the company only talks in one direction to the target consumers. And with social media, everything changed now. It's now a many-to-many communication. So everybody interacts with everybody on social media. And this is a way to interact with small money, with small budgets, with a lot of consumers. So it's all about, you know, digital branding, using every digital channel which you could use. Social commerce, online marketing, online advertising, referrals, you know, some PR events and sales. For sure, budgets are required. Online advertising is more and more expensive for companies. But you can target, and this is also like the big difference. You can target your customers, making very targeted online campaigns, which supports building strong and powerful digital brands. And, you know, this is also like changing. In former days, you know, we always explained marketing as doing bowling. And what does this mean? So it means that, you know, in the pre-social media area, you know, marketers targeted a certain customer group and they sent out their message. And it was like rolling the whole time. Nothing changed. The direction didn't change. It was quite easy to find your target. And so it was, but there was only like a one-way communication. It was only like throwing the bowling ball in one direction and reaching the target group. And today it's more like a flipper game, which means that you all know those flipper games, and you know, you start a message, and when you start a message in the social media area, you know, you don't know whether the message receives the target customer in the right way and when it will receive the target customers, and probably you have to resend the bowl. But this model offers more opportunities for digital brand building because you have more chances to interact. It's more complex, it's faster. It's not only doing marketing from Monday to Friday, because probably consumers have a lot of important questions on weekends, and they would like to interact with you on weekends throughout social media. So this is also like, you know, a different attitude, understanding that consumers are online 24 hours, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, and they want to interact with your brand. It's not only about, you know, 50 working hours a week. So showing you like one example which I really like is this example of Georgia olive farms. So some farmers in the US, they decided to grow again olive oil trees in Georgia. Because of the climate change, so they were able to grow again olive oil trees. And then they decided as a cooperative to build a strong brand. And what they did first is that they said, okay, we are only focusing on chefs. So they produce their olive oil, they went with their olive oil. So, you know, besides being online on all, important social media. They reached out to chefs, to the most important restaurants all across the US. And then, the development started. Chefs referred the products, chefs referred the products to their guests in the restaurants. The guests of the restaurants went to their retailers and they asked where to buy the product. And then they got into the market. And they had, until today, they have no big marketing budget. But they have been awarded as the best olive oil made in the US by the Wall Street Journal. So they got into the biggest online and print media in North America. So coming to the end, I would like to bridge between food startups and cooperatives. Because from my point of view, when we're talking about this food startup scene globally, which is massive, so those are this is a food tech landscape describing new disruptive digital business models in the food space. And you see all those brands, probably most of you don't know, but all those companies focusing on new products, they're focusing on new brands, they are fighting against the food giants as Unilever and Mars. And they have different business models. Some business models how to deliver food in a different way to consumers. Some different business models is just enabling technologies. But there are a lot of, a lot of business models, for example, focusing on new products, delivering new nutrition concepts, new wellness concepts. And just to give you an example, in 2018, those companies has been funded globally with 17 billion US dollars, which is huge when we're talking about the 50 billion which is coming from the European Union to farmers in Europe. So it's a huge amount of money, private-owned money, getting into those food startups. And for me, this is an opportunity for food and agribusiness cooperatives to work together with this food tech scene. Those companies developing new food concepts, disruptive models. So my perspective is that, partnering with food tech and venture capital funds could be very valuable for cooperatives. So what cooperatives bring in? They have production resources. They have access to ingredients, which probably are important. But they deliver what you have talked about. They deliver farmers' identity, which is very important for positioning brands. When we're talking about food tech companies, they have innovative product concepts, very innovative product concepts. They are far ahead when we're talking about being innovative compared to cooperatives. Probably this is one of the biggest weaknesses for me for cooperatives, because a lot of cooperatives, they're not innovative enough. Stuck in old business model, stuck in relying on policymakers. But this will change in the future. Food tech companies, they know how to digital brand, how to develop digital brands. And they have a growth focus, because the money they're receiving from the venture capital funds, they're focusing on business development, on growth. And also talking about venture capital, venture capital would bring in financial resources. Cooperatives would be able to have answers on the capital constraints. They have knowledge in company building, and they have knowledge in business development when it comes to export products to new markets. And for me, this triangle could be a very smart solution on how cooperatives can build together with partners very strong brands. So let me conclude on this. So first takeaway message for you is cooperatives have to move from a very member-centric to a more market, customer-centric approach. Second message, branding brings financial values. and open new markets in time of fast-changing market conditions, which is important to understand. Third point, starting branding process requires power of endurance, internal capabilities, knowledge, and long-term orientation. So when you decide as a cooperative that you focus on brand building, your members have to agree that probably in the next 4, 5, 6 years, the returns will not be as high as they have been before. Fourth message is that digital branding requires smaller budget, but budgets are also required, but digital branding allows also branding valuable brands with a small budget. And last but not least, partnering with food startups and venture capital funds opens new business opportunities for cooperatives in Europe and also globally. So thanks a lot for listening to me. If there are any questions, I'm glad to answer those. Thanks a lot.